Well, I missed the first game of the Nations League where Poland beat Wales 2-1 in Matchday 1 of 6. That is League A Group 4. In Poland and Wales' group, the other two teams are Belgium and Netherlands. Let me predict the other games though. Wait, I need to quickly refresh this page. So, Bulgaria, North Macedonia. Bulgaria's last international game was against Croatia, where they lost 2-1. Both teams got a red card. I would understand Bulgaria losing to Croatia, but then we go to Qatar versus Bulgaria. Losing to Qatar, I don't think is really... I don't think it should be possible, even for a team like Bulgaria. Maybe San Marino, but Bulgaria, I don't think so. Then we go to North Macedonia. Their last game was against Portugal in the World Cup qualifiers final. They played Italy in the World Cup qualifiers semi-final and they beat Italy 1-0. They beat the Euro winners 1-0. North Macedonia made it to the Euros. They might have came fourth, but they still made it to the Euros. I think in this game is, let me quickly see, it's League C Group 4. So I think North Macedonia could win this group. Because in their group, they have Georgia, Gibraltar and Bulgaria. I think they can top that group. I really do. And I think the first game will be a North Macedonia 3-1 victory. Next is Estonia versus San Marino. And San Marino is that team that's only ever won one game in their international career. Can they win their second game? Their last game was against Cape Verde, 2-0 loss. They've got Estonia and they are in League D Group 2. It's only a 3-team group, and in that group is Malta, Estonia and San Marino. Well, to be honest, it's probably going to have to happen. San Marino will probably lose their match again. They might be able to win a match in this group, but it's very unlikely after all of their international troubles. I'm going to say a 1-0 win to Estonia. We move on to Georgia versus Gibraltar, the second and final game in League C Group 4. Well, two teams with the same with the same same level. Georgia's last game was against Albania and they drew 0-0. Albania was in the Euros 2016. And also they beat Bosnia and Herzegovina, however you say the name, 1-0. They also beat Sweden 2-0. They beat Kosovo. They lost to Greece, lost to Spain of course, but they beat Sweden. They could be a good side, Georgia. Then we go to Gibraltar. And their last game, they drew 0-0 with Faroe Islands. Grenada, they drew 0-0 with. They lost to Latvia. They lost to Turkey. They lost to Netherlands. They lost to Montenegro. They lost to Norway. That was a tough group for them. And, well, they've got Georgia now. I will come out with my Nations League predictions But for now, in this game, I think it's going to be a 3-1 victory to Georgia. The next game today, Cyprus vs Kosovo. This is the last 5 o'clock kickoff. They are in League C Group 2 in their team. It's Northern Ireland, Greece, Kosovo and, of course, Cyprus. And Cyprus's last game was a 2-1 loss to Slovenia. They lost to Russia 6-0. They drew to Malta 2-2, but lost to Croatia, lost to Slovakia, lost to Russia, blah, blah, blah. Against Kosovo, their last game was a 1-1 draw with Switzerland. And they drew with Greece. They might have lost to the other big teams, but they drew with big teams as well. So, Kosovo could be a big, there could be a big battle for Kosovo. I'm going to say 2-2. I think it's going to be the first draw. Next, we move on to a game that's been cancelled, Albania vs Russia. Then, we move on to the 7:45 kickoff games. And it's the last game of League C Group T Matchday 1. We've already discussed Cyprus vs Kosovo, so let's now discuss Northern Ireland vs Greece. Northern Ireland, their last game was a 1-0 loss to Hungary. They beat Luxembourg 3-1. They drew with Italy. They beat Lithuania, lost to Bulgaria, lost to Switzerland, drew with Switzerland, beat Lithuania, lost to Ukraine, and all of that. Did they beat USA? No. Well, Northern Ireland could be a big challenge. I don't know if they will be, but they could be. Greece. Their last games, they lost to Montenegro, they beat Romania, they drew with Kosovo, they lost to Spain, they lost to Sweden, they beat Georgia. You know what? This could be a tight game. And I'm going to go ahead and say that it's going to be a 0-0 draw. All of the teams in League C Group 2 are going to end on 1 point at the end of today. Serbia play Norway now in League B Group 4. In their group is Sweden, Norway, Serbia and Slovenia. Serbia are playing Norway. I think it's going to be easy for Norway. You never know. Serbia lost to Denmark. They beat Hungary, but they also beat Portugal and Azerbaijan and Luxembourg, but they drew to Ireland, beat Luxembourg, beat Qatar, lost to Japan, drew with Jamaica. They drew, so basically they're in the group, they won 1 and drew 1 with Portugal, which is actually really good. Now we move on to Norway. Norway beat Armenia 9-0. Beat Slovakia 2-0, lost to Netherlands, drew with Latvia, beat Montenegro, drew with Turkey, beat Gibraltar, beat Latvia, drew with Netherlands, lost to Greece, beat Luxembourg, beat Montenegro, lost to Turkey and beat Gibraltar. It's going to be closer than I would have said. I would have said Norway would demolish them, but now I've looked at the things. I don't know. I'm just going to say a Norway 2-0 victory. Erling Haaland is going to do it for them. Now we move on to Israel versus Iceland, and they are in League B Group 2. It's a 3-team group because Russia has been disqualified because of the war. Iceland, Israel and Albania. It's the first game, Israel versus Iceland. Let's look at Israel. Israel drew with Romania, lost to Germany, beat Faroe Islands, lost to Austria, beat Moldova, lost to Scotland, lost to Denmark, beat Austria. They're a goodish side, but I would say Iceland is probably better. They drew. You know what? Iceland has been going downhill recently. You know what? Like, I don't think Iceland or Israel will, like, win this group. I think Albania could do it. But Iceland has been going down recently. I'm going to say it's going out there by a mile. I'm going to say 2-2. And then we move on to the first League A game. So in League A, we've got France, Denmark, Croatia, Austria, Spain, Portugal, Switzerland, Czech Republic, Italy, Germany, England, Hungary, Belgium, Netherlands, Poland and Wales. Well, it's the first game I'm predicting. We've already had Poland versus Wales, but yeah. Czech Republic is in Switzerland. So in League A, there's 4 teams that got to the semi-finals of last Nations League. And that was France, Italy, Spain and Belgium. France won it, of course. Czech Republic versus Switzerland. If we look at Czech Republic, they drew with Wales. They lost to Sweden in the World Cup qualifier final. They could have got to the World Cup, but Sweden beat them. Oh, I know, that was a semi-final, sorry. They beat Estonia 2-0. They beat Belarus. They drew with Wales. Lost to Belgium, of course. In the Euros, they got to the quarterfinal, but then lost to Denmark. On that road, they beat Netherlands. They lost to England, of course. They drew with Croatia, and they beat Scotland. Switzerland, they were also in the Euros, but after the Euros, they drew with Kosovo, lost to England, beat Bulgaria, drew with Italy, beat Lithuania, beat Northern Ireland, drew with Northern Ireland, drew with Italy. They also got to the quarterfinals and they lost on penalties. They beat France on penalties. They beat Turkey in the group. They lost to Italy in the group and they drew with Wales in the group. This is a tough game to predict. It's a really tough game to predict, and I don't know how I'm going to predict this game. But today at 7:45, I think that Czech Republic will beat Switzerland 3-2. I think it's going to be a massive game. Brilliant game. Patrick Schick will probably get 1 or 2, but I don't know. Now we move on to the second game I'm going to predict in League A. It's also today at 7:45. League A Group 2. We've just predicted Czech Republic versus Switzerland. Now it's time to predict Spain versus Portugal. Probably the biggest game in League A Group 2. It's probably the biggest game. Spain beat Iceland 5-0, beat Albania, beat Sweden, beat Greece, beat Kosovo, beat Georgia, lost to Sweden. And in the Euros, they got to the semi-final. They lost to Italy, the champions, on penalties. They beat Switzerland on penalties, as you just saw. They beat Croatia, massive game, extra time. I remember that game. In the group, they beat Slovakia, they drew with Poland, and they drew with Sweden. They were lucky to get out. Now we move on to Portugal. They were also in the Euros. They were in the group of death. But before that, after that, they beat North Macedonia 2-0 to get to the World Cup. North Macedonia, I really wish they got to the World Cup. They're getting better, and they will probably, hopefully, be there soon. They beat Turkey in the semi-final. They lost to Serbia. They drew with Ireland. They beat Luxembourg. They beat Qatar. They beat Azerbaijan. They beat Qatar. They beat Ireland. And in the Euros, they got to the round of 16 when they lost to Belgium 1-0. In the group, they drew 2-2 with France. Lost to Germany 4-2. And also beat Hungary 3-0. That was a group of death, and Hungary was so close to getting out of that group. I wish they did get out of that group, and one of the big teams would have been out. I wanted Portugal to go out, to be honest. So this will be a tight game, and in the World Cup, 2018, these two teams actually drew 3-3. And you know what? I'm going to say 3-3 again. I think Spain and Portugal will draw 3-3. Spain was a semi-finalist in the Nations League. Well, actually, I think they were more than a semi-finalist. Yes, they were a finalist. They came second place. I'm going to say 3-3 for this game. Don't know why. And last game today, I'm going to predict all of Matchday 1, but the last game today, Slovenia versus Sweden. We go to League B now, Group 4. We predicted a game in this group already. We predicted Serbia versus Norway. Time to predict Slovenia versus Sweden. Well, Slovenia, they drew with Qatar. The Belgium game got cancelled. They drew with Croatia. They beat Cyprus. They drew with their rival Slovakia. They lost to Russia. They beat Malta. They lost to Croatia. They beat Malta. They drew with their rivals. They beat Gibraltar, blah, blah, blah. Sweden was in the Euros, as we know, but after that, they lost in the final to Poland. They were so close to getting to the World Cup, but they just missed out because Poland beat them 2-0. Both Sweden versus Finland games are cancelled. They lost to Spain, lost to Georgia, beat Greece, luckily, but also beat Kosovo. But they also lost to Greece. They beat Spain. And in the Euros, they lost to Ukraine in the round of 16. In the group, they beat Poland, they beat Slovakia, and they drew with Spain. They had a good group stage. I have to admit they had a good group stage, but I think they would rather have took that 3-2 result against Poland and put it there and beat Poland 3-2 there. I think Sweden will beat Slovenia, to be honest, and I'm going to say it will be a 3-1 win for Sweden. Now we move on to tomorrow's games, and well, we have our first one at 3 o'clock, and the only one at 3 o'clock. We go to League C Group 3, and this is our first time predicting a League C Group 3 game. It is Kazakhstan versus Azerbaijan. Let's go to Kazakhstan's last games. They beat Tajikistan. They lost to France. They lost to Finland. They lost to Bosnia. They drew to Bosnia as well. They lost to Finland. They drew with Ukraine. They lost to North Macedonia. They drew with Ukraine. They lost to France. They in the last Nations League, they lost to Lithuania. Azerbaijan, they lost to Latvia, they lost to Malta, they lost to Luxembourg, they lost to Serbia, they lost to Ireland, they lost to Portugal, they drew with Ireland, they lost to Luxembourg. They beat Belarus, and Belarus is actually in their group as well. So I'm going to say with this game, I'm going to say a 1-1 draw. It's as simple as that. Now we move on to a 5 o'clock kickoff game in League D, Group 1. We have Latvia versus Andorra. Let's go and see Latvia's most recent games. Well, they beat Azerbaijan 1-0, as we just saw. They drew with Kaiwat. They beat Gibraltar. They drew with Norway. They lost to Turkey. They lost to Netherlands. They drew with Montenegro. They lost to Norway. They beat Gibraltar. They lost to Estonia. They beat Lithuania. They drew with Turkey. Now let's go to Andorra's most recent games. They beat Grenada. They beat St. Kitts and Nevis. They lost to Albania. They lost to Poland. They beat San Marino. They lost to England. They lost to Hungary. They lost to England. So, with this game, I'm actually going to say a 2-1 victory to Latvia. Now we move on to a 7:45 kickoff game, which is a big one. Not the biggest one at 7:45 tomorrow, but it's a big one. It is Croatia versus Austria. They are in League A Group 1. It's the first League A Group 1 game we are predicting. Sadly, though, it's not the winners. We are predicting Croatia versus Austria. Well, Croatia's most recent games, they beat Bulgaria, drew with Slovenia, they beat Russia, they beat Malta, they drew with Slovakia, they beat Cyprus, they beat Slovenia, they beat Slovakia, they drew with Russia. In the Euros, they got to the round of 16. It was a brilliant game, as I said before. They lost to Spain 5-3. In the group stage, they beat Scotland 3-1. They drew Czech Republic. They lost to England. Now, we go to Austria. They drew with Scotland. They lost to Wales in the World Cup qualifiers semi-final. They beat Moldova. They beat Israel. They lost to Denmark. They beat Faroe Islands. They lost to Scotland. They lost to Israel. They lost to Moldova. In the Euros round of 16, they lost to Italy 2-1, the champions of Europe. In the group stage, they beat Ukraine 1-0. They lost to Netherlands 2-0, and they beat North Macedonia 3-1. Now, let's predict the game. I'm just going to say 3-0 win to Croatia. Nothing more than that, nothing less than that. 3-1, I'm going to say. Liechtenstein versus Moldova now. They are in League D Group 1. So it's the last League D game we are going to predict. Liechtenstein versus Moldova. If we go look at Liechtenstein's games, they lost to Faroe Island, they lost to Cape Verde, they lost to Romania, they lost to Germany, they lost to Iceland, they lost to North Macedonia, they drew with Armenia. As you can see, they're not a good international side, but they could be better than Moldova. Moldova, they lost to South Korea, they lost to Uganda, they lost to Austria, they lost to Scotland, they lost to Israel, they lost to Denmark, they lost to Faroe Islands, they lost to Scotland, they lost to Austria, they beat Azerbaijan, they lost to Turkey. I think the game's going to end 1-0 Liechtenstein. Now, Belarus versus Slovakia in League C, Group 3. Slovakia will probably win this group. Let's look at Belarus's last games. They beat Bahrain 1-0. They beat India 3-0. They lost to Wales. They lost to Czech Republic. They lost to Estonia. They lost to Belgium. They lost to Wales. They lost to Czech Republic. They lost to Azerbaijan, who's in their group in the Nations League as well. Let's go and look at Slovakia then. They beat Finland, lost to Norway, beat Malta, drew with their rivals, drew with Croatia, lost to Russia, beat Cyprus, lost to Croatia, drew with their rivals. In the Euros, they got grouped as they lost 5-0 to Slovakia. They lost to Sweden, but they beat Poland. But they got grouped. What can I say? Well, for this game, I think it's going to be an easy 2-0 for Slovakia, to be honest. Now, let's move on to Belgium-Netherlands, another big game. And that is in League A, Group 4. And guess what? It's another semi-finalist from last year's Nations League. Belgium. They sadly ended their run whilst they lost 3-2 to France, who are the champions. Can they do better this year? Well, they got Netherlands in their group. They've also got Poland and Wales. Belgium, they beat Burkina Faso. They drew with Ireland, they drew with Wales, they beat Estonia, they beat Belarus, they beat Czech Republic, they beat Estonia. Now let's go to the Euros, where they got quarter-final knockout as they lost 2-1 to the winners, Italy. Round of 16, they beat Portugal 1-0. In the group, they beat Finland 2-0, they beat Denmark 2-1, and they beat Russia 3-0. Now we move on to Netherlands, and Netherlands drew 1-1 with Germany. They beat Denmark 4-2. They beat Norway 2-0. They drew Montenegro 2-2. They beat Gibraltar 6-0. They beat Latvia 1-0. They beat Turkey 6-1. They beat Montenegro 4-0. They drew Norway 1-1. Now let's move on to the Euros, when they lost 2-0 to to Czech Republic, in the round of 16. In the group stage, they beat North Macedonia 3-0. They beat Austria 2-0, and they drew beat Ukraine 3-2. Now, time to predict. And you know what? I'm just going to say it. It's going to be a massive game. It's probably going to be a 4-2 to Belgium. Massive game. Now we move on to the winners of the Nations League 2020 to 2021 season. France vs Denmark, League A, Group 1. France beat South Africa, beat Ivory Coast, beat Finland, beat Kazakhstan, beat Finland, drew with Ukraine, beat Bosnia. In the Euros, they got knocked out in round 16 penalties against Switzerland. In the group stage, so in the group of death, they drew 2-2 with Portugal, drew 1-1 with Hungary, and beat Germany 1-0. Denmark now, they had a massive run in the Euros. We'll get to that in a minute. They beat Serbia, they beat Denmark. They lost to the Netherlands, they lost to Scotland, they beat Faroe Islands, they beat Austria, they beat Moldova, they beat Israel, they beat Faroe Islands, they beat Scotland. In the Euros, they were semi-finalists. They lost 2-1 to England, sadly, for Denmark. But in the quarter-final, they beat Czech Republic 2-1. They beat Wales 4-0. In the group stage, they beat Russia 4-1. They lost to Belgium 2-1. Sadly, the game we're coming to did have a tragedy for Christian Eriksen and the Denmark team, but luckily he's back, and he probably will play in this game against France when they lost 1-0 to Finland. Well, I'm just going to say it's going to be a 2-1 win to France. In the 2018 World Cup, they're in the same group, and I think in the 2022 World Cup, they are also going to be in the same group as well. Now we move on to Saturday's games, and the last day of Matchday 1. Armenia play with the Republic of Ireland in League B, Group 1. Armenia's last games, well, let's just say terrible loss to Norway, beat Montenegro, lost to Germany, lost to North Macedonia, lost to Romania, drew with Iceland, drew with Liechtenstein, lost to Germany, drew with North Macedonia, lost to Sweden, drew with Croatia, and the Republic of Ireland, let's just say, beat Lithuania, drew with Belgium, beat Luxembourg, drew with Portugal, beat Azerbaijan. Well, I'm going to say it's going to be a 3-0 win to the Republic of Ireland. I'm sorry, Armenia, but I'm just saying what I think. No, I need to go find the games again. There, now Lithuania versus Luxembourg at 5 o'clock on Saturday the 4th of June. Lithuania's last games, they lost to Ireland 1-0. They lost they beat San Marino, but everyone but that one team either beat or drew with San Marino. They They lost to Northern Ireland, sorry. They lost to Switzerland. They beat Bulgaria. They lost to Italy. They lost to Bulgaria on the other game. This is League C, Group 1, by the way. But Luxembourg, their last games, they lost to Bosnia 1-0. They lost to Northern Ireland. They lost to Ireland. They lost to... they beat Azerbaijan, actually. They lost to Portugal, lost to Serbia, beat Azerbaijan again, lost to Scotland, lost to Norway. I'm just going to go with a 0-0 draw for this game. A 0-0 draw. Now, also at 5 o'clock, we come to the Finland vs Bosnia and... I don't even know how to say this name. They're in League B, Group 3. Bosnia and Herzegovina. Finland's last games, they lost to Slovakia, they drew with Iceland, they lost to France, they beat Bosnia and Herzegovina, and they are actually playing each other, so I could take that into account. They beat Kazakhstan, they lost to Ukraine, they lost to France, they beat Kazakhstan in the Euros. They lost to Belgium 2-0. They lost to Russia 1-0, but they beat Denmark 1-0. Bosnia's games, I'm just going to say Bosnia. They beat Luxembourg, lost to Georgia, lost to Ukraine, lost to Finland, drew with Ukraine, beat Kazakhstan, drew with Kazakhstan, drew with France, lost to Denmark, drew with Montenegro, lost to France, drew with Costa Rica, drew with Finland, lost to Italy in the last Nations League. Finland will probably win this game 3-1. Now we move on to Hungary versus England, our first game in this Nations League, League A Group 3. It's the first League A Group 3 game. We're predicting it's at 5 o'clock. Mark it in your calendar. Saturday the 4th of June, 5 o'clock. Hungary play England. Well, let's look at Hungary's last games then. Beat Northern Ireland, lost to Serbia, beat Poland, beat San Marino, drew with England, lost to Albania, beat Andorra, lost to Albania, lost to England, drew with Germany. Well, this is the Euros now. They drew with Germany, drew with France, lost to Portugal. They had a good group stage. They were in the group of death, but they still had a good group stage. If we look at the Euros, they were only... Listen. They only... got knocked out by 2 points, which is unbelievable, especially in a group of death. England's last games, let's go through them really quickly. They beat Ivory Coast, they beat Switzerland, they beat San Marino, they beat Albania, they drew with Hungary, they beat Andorra, they drew with Poland, they beat Andorra, they beat Hungary, and now let's go to Euros. Sadly, in the final, we came second as we lost on penalties to Italy. We beat Denmark in the semi-final. We beat Ukraine in the quarter-final. We beat Germany in the round of 16. We beat Czech Republic. We drew with Scotland, and we beat Croatia. I'm going to just say and come out 3-0 to England. Next, one of the biggest games. Italy, they were in the semi-finals last year versus Germany. Italy, well, in the CONMEBOL UEFA Cup of Champions, which is, well, it was yesterday. It's the winners of the Euros versus the winners of the Copa America. They lost to Argentina 3-0. They beat Turkey. They lost to North Macedonia. They drew with Northern Ireland. They drew with Switzerland. They beat Lithuania. They drew with Switzerland. They drew with Bulgaria. They are the winners of the Euro 2020 as they beat England on penalties. They beat Spain on penalties. They beat Belgium 2-1 and they beat Austria 2-1 in the group stage. They beat Wales 1-0. They beat Switzerland 3-0 and they beat Turkey 3-0. Let's go to Germany's games then. Drew with Netherlands, beat Israel, beat Armenia, beat Liechtenstein, beat North Macedonia, beat Romania, beat Iceland, beat Armenia, beat Liechtenstein. Round of 16 lost to England 2-0 in the Euros. In the group stage, drew 2-2 with Hungary, beat Portugal 4-2 and lost to France. I'm just going to say 2-3. Germany's going to win 3-2. The penultimate game, 7:45 kickoff, Montenegro versus Romania in League B Group 3. Montenegro's last games, they beat Greece, lost to Armenia, lost to Turkey, drew with Netherlands, lost to Norway, beat Gibraltar, drew with Latvia, lost to Netherlands, Romania, drew with Israel, lost to Greece, beat Liechtenstein, drew with Iceland, beat Armenia, lost to Germany, drew with North Macedonia, beat Liechtenstein. I think it's going to be a 2-0 win for Romania. And now the last game of the Nations League Matchday 1. Turkey vs Faroe Islands. League C Group 1. Turkey's last games, well, they lost to Italy, lost to Portugal, beat Montenegro, beat Gibraltar, beat Latvia, drew with Norway, lost to Netherlands, beat Gibraltar, drew with Montenegro, and in the Euros they got grouped. They lost 3-1 to Turkey, Switzerland, lost 2-0 to Wales, and lost 3-0 to Italy. Now Faroe Islands, let's go through this quickly as well. They beat Liechtenstein, drew with Gibraltar, lost to Israel, lost to Denmark, lost to Scotland, lost to Austria, beat Moldova, and lost to Denmark. I think it's going to be 3-0 Turkey. So, that's all of Matchday 1 predicted. I predicted all of Matchday 1 except from the Poland-Wales game, which came out yesterday. I can't predict that game. Let's look at the goals. Kaminsky, Johnny Williams, Karol Swiderski. Assist goes to Pujax and Matondo. Yellow cards, Berinsky, Morrill, Norrington Davies. They weren't any red cards. I'll see you all on... Let's go down to... I'll see you all on Sunday, Saturday-ish, with my next video, like, predicting Matchday 2. See you then. Oh, also, actually, you'll see me either later, probably later, yeah, predicting the tables in the Nations League. So, yeah, bye.